According to assessments by United States intelligence agencies, Russia was evaluated as attempting to seize not only Ukraine, but also the Baltic states and parts of Poland. Also in Estonia, Russian border guards have crossed into Estonian territory, and Russian drones still fly over Herky. Today, we will take a closer look at this topic. Let's get right into it. Recently, the United States intelligence agencies made an assessment of Russia, and this has significant implications. President Putin of Russia is trying to take control of all of Ukraine and ultimately regain control over some parts of Europe that were once part of the Soviet Union. According to a Reuters report, some of these areas in Europe are former Soviet states. These are countries like the Baltic states and Poland. Russia has continued to say that it does not pose a threat to Europe, though. When you see these assessments, do you believe Russia might invade parts of the Baltic states or Poland to expand its territory? Even Mike Kickley of the United States House Intelligence Committee said intelligence hasn't changed during the war, and authorities report Putin wants more and is watching closely. In Europe, information has steadily emerged, and intelligence agencies in Germany and Denmark have repeatedly warned that Russia might invade. However, the fact that United States intelligence agencies also report this suggests Russia is making some preparations. This time, what I'm going to talk about is information from Ukraine, so it should be taken with a grain of salt. Kirilo Budanov, Ukraine's military intelligence chief, told LBY on December 20 that Russia has sped up its preparations for possible military actions in Europe and plans to occupy the Baltic states. Kirilo Budanov, Ukraine's military intelligence chief, said Russia originally planned to invade Europe by 2030, but has now moved the timeline up to 2027. Interestingly, 2027 is also when the United States is expected to stop defending Europe. As I mentioned repeatedly in previous videos, the United States has also informed Europe that by 2027, Europe must take direct responsibility for most of NATO's conventional defense capabilities. Europe is rearming, but completing all rearmament by 2027 is impossible, so there's reluctance. With talk of a possible Russian invasion of the Baltic states by 2027, Europe's anxiety is rising, especially as Russia's provocations persist. First, let's take a look at the Baltic states. On the morning of December 17th, 3 Russian border guards illegally entered Estonian territory. According to the Estonian Ministry of the Interior, 3 Russian border guards in military uniforms arrived near Estonia around 10 a.m. on a hovercraft, entered Estonian territory on foot, and before the Estonian border guards arrived, they left Estonian territory after about 20 minutes. Estonia appears to view this as a serious security threat. Estonia has significantly increased the number of border guards in the area to respond to additional security threats. At the same time, Estonia also summoned the Russian ambassador. In fact, it's understandable, since this isn't the first time such a provocation has happened, right? In early November 2025, a Russian Federal Security Service border guard boat flying a private military company flag was seen on the Narva River between Estonia and Russia. And in May 2022, the Russian border guards also removed more than 20 buoys that had been installed in the river. With Russia's airspace violations over NATO territory increasing, we are now also seeing territorial incursions. Lithuania, another Baltic state, even declared a state of emergency. In Lithuania, the issue was Belarus. A state of emergency was declared due to balloons repeatedly crossing the border from Belarus. A state of emergency was declared December 9th. Belarusian cigarette smuggling organizations kept sending contraband into Lithuania using balloons. As a result, Vilnius airport was closed several times, and Lithuania classified these balloons as a hybrid attack. The state of emergency lets the Lithuanian government use more measures and agencies to address smuggling balloons. They can now deploy troops to border areas too. Is this Lithuania? Prime Minister Ruginian stated that to counter Belarus's hybrid attacks, we must take the strictest measures, defend the hardest hit areas, and respond forcefully. Lithuania, bordering Russia and its ally Belarus, is highly sensitive to security threats like drone attacks and electronic warfare, often blaming Russia for these incidents. Is it also a problem in Turkey? There was an incident where a Russian military reconnaissance drone, the Merlin VR drone, crashed in western Turkey. However, no damage was reported as a result. It crashed near the Greek border. On December 19, a Russian-made Orlan 10 drone also crashed in Turkey. Earlier on December 15, a drone entered Turkish airspace from the Black Sea and was shot down over Ankara by the Turkish military. Turkey issued a warning to both Russia and Ukraine. The Turkish Ministry of Defense released a statement saying that since the war between Ukraine and Russia is ongoing, their officials must be even more cautious about such negative situations related to Black Sea security on both sides. 3 drones violated Turkish airspace in 5 days, so Turkey is responding very sensitively, right? The first drone reached Ankara, Turkey's capital. There were quite a few people who questioned Turkey's air defense posture, but I think many people would feel the same way, right? Russia is already struggling in Ukraine, so do they really have the resources to reach the Baltic region? But this question is risky because it looks at Russia only from a traditional perspective. That's because Russia wants a country that can withstand a long war, not just build a strong army now. The Russian military has definitely weakened in terms of quality. They've suffered heavy losses of experienced officers and special forces, and they've also used up a significant number of modern tanks and precision-guided weapons. But at the same time, Russia has reorganized its entire national system on the assumption that the war will be prolonged. The Russian economy has already effectively shifted to a full wartime economy. Civilian factories have been converted into military factories, and facilities for civilian production have been switched to producing shells, missiles, and drone parts. As a result, it's now being assessed that Russia's shell production has actually increased compared to before the war, and the same goes for missiles. At one point, there was an analysis that Russia had almost exhausted its precision-guided missiles, but now the production rate is keeping up with the launch rate, and for some weapon systems, stockpiles are even increasing. If they stop the war, this massive wartime economy will come to a complete halt. Some analysis suggests Russia must keep fighting, with external cooperation being the key factor. Russia is no longer fighting alone, receiving many shells and ballistic missiles from North Korea, as well as drone technology and combat experience from Iran. This cooperation goes beyond a simple arms deal. It's about creating a war network for prolonged conflict. Russia prefers deploying cheap, mass-produced weapons to exhaust opponents, rather than using a few high-performance weapons like the West. The same goes for troops. Russia is continuously replenishing its forces through a mobilization system, and is making the harsh choice of prioritizing maintaining the front lines over the survival rate of its soldiers. Here, the war's outcome depends on endurance, not tactics. Russia aims not for a quick win, but to outlast its opponent. This explains Russia's hidden strategies. It doesn't expect to beat NATO militarily, but believes NATO will become divided, exhausted, and unable to handle the economic strain. Russia now seeks to weaken the West through small provocations and prolonged pressure rather than a rapid, large-scale invasion. From Russia's view, threatening the Baltic states is a calculated choice, not a reckless gamble, and must be made now. What's even more serious is that even within Europe, there's a growing and open doubt about whether the United States would actually intervene immediately if the Baltic states were invaded. In the past, just the mention of NATO's Article 5 being invoked served as a strong deterrent, but now each country is offering different interpretations of how that clause would actually work. Within NATO, the gap in perspectives between Eastern European and Western European countries is also widening. The Baltic states and Poland view Russia as an existential threat, while some Western European nations remain cautious due to fears of escalation. Such division likely seems like a great opportunity for Russia. Many believe Russia is unlikely to launch a full-scale war against the Baltic states. Instead, Russia repeatedly blurs the line between war and peace through actions such as border incursions, airspace violations, drone deployments, and activities by unidentified armed groups. Because these provocations aren't easily defined as invasions, it's hard to trigger an immediate NATO military response. If in this situation NATO's response is delayed, or the messages from each country are inconsistent, Russia will draw an important conclusion from that. It will be convinced that NATO cannot act as one. At that moment, the level of Russia's provocations will inevitably rise. At first, it might just be a brief crossing of the border, but later it could lead to a prolonged standoff, and eventually there is a possibility that armed forces could get involved. Russia has always chosen to cross the line step by step, watching the other side's reaction. If NATO doesn't respond clearly and firmly to these provocations against the Baltic states, Russia will assume the red line is farther than expected. If that happens, the Baltic states could become both targets of pressure and a test for NATO's unity. The greatest danger is that repeated misjudgments and miscalculations, despite neither side wanting war, could trigger an irreversible conflict. Russia is confident due to the other's hesitation, while NATO hesitates because of internal divisions. With this structure in place, tensions around the Baltic states will keep rising. What actions will Russia take next? Share your thoughts in the comments. That's the end of the video. Thank you.